SNMP managers. Here we will take a look on how to forward alarms from DataMiner to a third-party system and basically use the northbound interfacing and use SNMP traps or inform messages to notify another system when an alarm happens on DataMiner or when a critical alarm happens, for instance. Let's take a look at that. So the SNMP managers, first we're going to take a look at the purpose and briefly talk about the SNMP basics so that we are aligned what we are talking about. And of course, dive into the user interface to add a new destination, an SNMP forwarding to a certain destination, and go through the configuration because there's some configuration coming along with that. And wrap it up with just a simple trap example, how that looks like. Okay, so basically we have alarms in our DataMiner system, and maybe some of them, like the critical ones on a certain site or something like that, need to be forwarded to a third-party system. So we can use for that the SNMP interfacing we have northbound available. So we will be able to choose SNMP traps or inform messages. I'll come back to that. So in the SNMP forwarding, we're basically going to get alarms from our DataMiner system out of DataMiner towards another system. Just be aware that SNMP traps will be sent typically from the virtual SNMP agent if there is one configured on an element. So when we add an element to our DataMiner system, we can also create a virtual SNMP agent and assign a specific dedicated IP address to it, so that a third-party system can basically do SNMP gets and sets on that IP address. And basically the IP address of the virtual SNMP agent is also going to be able to send traps to that third-party system. If there is no virtual SNMP agent defined and you didn't create a dedicated IP address for that specific element, like maybe a lot of your elements in the DataMiner system, they will just send the SNMP traps from the IP address of the DataMiner system, of course. All right, SNMP, just a couple of brief basics. So typically we have something called an SNMP agent embedded into some device we're monitoring. So a device like a switch, for instance, we're monitoring, typically has an SNMP agent in there, we call it. And an SNMP manager is a piece of software like DataMiner being able to interrogate the SNMP agent and do basically gets and sets on there. Getting information, pulling information from the device, and also doing settings, configuration changes on the device. The definition of what you can get and set is basically defined in what we call an MIP, a management instrumentation base, a definition file of all the different gets and sets you can do with the object identifiers. That's like unique ID you have to do a get or a set on a certain parameter. So DataMiner has basically an SNMP manager in there that is able to interrogate SNMP agents for all the devices we're monitoring. But DataMiner basically also has an SNMP agent in there that allows other third-party systems managers, SNMP managers, to interrogate DataMiner and to retrieve information and also receive traps from DataMiner. Because I'm talking about gets and sets, but instead of continuously polling a certain parameter, you can also receive a notification from the SNMP agent. That's basically a little bit like an alarm. So whenever the device has something to tell, it can basically send an SNMP trap, the gray arrow here, to DataMiner so that DataMiner is immediately aware of that change or that alarm condition. So also DataMiner is able to send SNMP traps to a third-party system. Basically, the alarms we are detecting, we can forward them to another system. Note that we are not only able to do so for SNMP elements, which are polling SNMP devices, but any elements. If we are talking to an HTTP API, or if we're talking to a serial port or a custom TCP/IP connection, it doesn't really matter. We basically get the information from somewhere, and we can also translate that and forward that information as an SNMP trap to a third-party system And if the virtual SNMP agent is configured, it can also do SNMP gets and sets on there. Now, something to be aware of is that we do have downside, you could say, that an SNMP trap is using UDP. UDP is basically unreliable, you could say, because there is no confirmation or no guarantee that the packet that you're sending is going to be delivered. Basically, UDP just sends it out and we just hope that it arrives. So that's a little bit the downside. If we send an alarm to another system, we are not 100% sure that the trap will effectively arrive. So we do have some countermeasures there in the configuration to be able to handle that. So if it's lost, we are not aware of it. If there's somewhere a network interruption, we just send the traps and we are not aware that they are not arriving. So keep that in mind, that the SNMP traps are by nature unreliable, you could say. Okay, so that's a little bit of the basics. Let's dive into the UI. So we are going to configure this in the System Center. Within the System Center, we are focused here now on this page, the SNMP forwarding page. So in here, we can list basically a list of destinations, you could say, a list of third-party systems that we want to notify of certain alarms. So we do have a long list here of SNMP managers, third-party systems, where we send alarms of the DataMiner system to. So we can add a new one by clicking on the new button. So let's immediately dive into the UI. So we are connected here to our dcp.skyline.be system as before. The easiest way is to click on your user icon and to go to System Center. And within the System Center, we are able to go to the SNMP forwarding here. As you can see, we have 0 SNMP managers, so we will need to add a new one during this video to configure it to send certain traps to a certain destination. So you can do so by clicking on the new, and then a new one will be added. It is immediately selected and you can see all the details on the right hand side, which we will go through in a minute. So you can easily add new SNMP managers by using the new button at the bottom. The one that you select, you see all the details there. So if you want to change an existing SNMP manager that is already in the list, you just select it, make your changes, and you save it by using the buttons on the lower right hand side. The previous and next is basically going through the tab pages. We will go through that in just a minute. Just one thing I want to note there, the enable the forwarding of the SNMP notifications. If you enable or disable it, for instance, you don't need it for a day, you can just disable it. You leave the configuration as it is, but you just like pause it, you could say, for a certain period of time. And that's also indicated in the list. The ones that are in the gray font are basically the ones that are disabled at this point in time. Okay, using the right-click menu on any of those SNMP destinations, you can immediately easily duplicate one and of course delete it as well. And there is a resend in there. If you click on the resend, you will get this pop-up here at the bottom. And what it basically does is, let's say that you're forwarding your critical alarms to a third-party system, and all of a sudden there's some kind of network interruption, or the system goes down for some maintenance, and you have like a 1 hour gap where the alarms did not get through. Well, basically you can easily go here in DataMiner, right click again on that destination that was not receiving your alarms for the last hour, you could say. You can go to resend and you can say from this time until this end time, I want to resend all the alarms. And basically DataMiner will go into the history database of all the alarms, fetch those alarms, make the filtered, of course, subset, and send those again to the third-party system. There is also an option where you can say that the notifications need to be tunneled through one DataMiner agent, and one DataMiner agent is responsible for forwarding all the alarms once more. Otherwise, basically, every DataMiner agent will handle his own alarm. So if you have 5 DataMiner agents, 5 of them will send a portion of the alarms to the destination. If you're using one, then all the alarms are first gathered into that one DataMiner agent you chose here, and then those are being forwarded. Okay, to go through that configuration. So in our UI, I just clicked on the new, and it added a new item in there, and you can immediately enable it, of course. Don't forget about enabling that, otherwise it will remain in gray. You can give it a more meaningful name, my third-party system that I want to send the alarms to, and then of course the IP address. So that's going to be the first important thing, and that I need to choose, of course. What's the IP address of the destination that I want to send the alarms to? Speaks for itself, I guess. That doesn't need more information. You also have a community string you can attach to an SNMP trap. That's only for V1, V2. And there is also a possibility for a custom notification description, a custom trap description we basically are able to add. That's an additional binding that is being added. And this can be used for filtering on the other side, on the third-party system, because maybe you have 2 DataMiner systems and they are both sending alarms to the same destination where it's being consolidated. And that maybe allows you to specify there like the DMS name, if it's my IDTV or if it's my playout, or the name of your system that you could leverage then on the other side for filtering or for adding additional information to that. And then, of course, is important as well the SNMP version. So V1, V2, V3. If you're going for V1, you're not going to be able to have a choice in the next option. It's going to be always an SNMP trap. If you go for SNMP V2 or V3, you are able to choose in the next thing here, the notification type, the inform message. So what's the big difference between a trap and an inform message? A trap is just sending the alarm to the other system as a trap, and we don't care about it anymore. And since it's UDP, we don't know if it's gonna arrive. So we just hope it's arriving. If you go for the inform message, it's like an improved version, you could say, of the trap, because an inform message needs to be acknowledged by the other side. So if I send an inform message to the third-party system needs to send back an acknowledgement. And then I know, okay, he received the alarm. If we do not get the alarm message, the acknowledge, then we will basically do a retry. And we try again, and hopefully it will eventually arrive. So if the other side supports inform messages, it's definitely something you want to choose and prefer above the more unreliable trap messages. Also here we have the possibility to immediately configure that all the notifications, traps or inform messages we're sending to the other system need to be tunneled through one DataMiner agent. So by default, if I have like 10 DataMiner agents in my system, all of them will send their own alarms. So if an alarm happens on DataMiner 1, it will send the alarm. If an alarm happens on DataMiner 10, he will send the alarm from his IP address. So there will basically be 10 IP addresses on the destination, on the third-party system that will be receiving the traps. If you want to avoid that, that is possible by activating this option and choosing one server that is going to basically gather the alarms and forward them. That is sometimes interesting. You do, although, of course, create a single point of failure. If that chosen DataMiner agent goes down, not a single alarm is sent to the other system anymore. So it's not a recommended option, but sometimes needed. The port number is by default 162, so you can change that if you would like to do so. Now, if you choose SNMP v3, there will be some additional SNMP v3 things popping up below there, and that's more the security that has been added. So the big difference between SNMP v2 and v3 is that v3 has some more advanced possibilities to do authentication and encryption. So you do have some additional fields related to that without going into too much detail there, with username, authentication, password, encryption, password. And in the advanced, you can choose the security level and protocol. So if authentication is required and if encryption is required, if you do both or one or the other. And then whether you choose authentication and no encryption, there will be the authentication algorithm and the encryption algorithm, which will be enabled or disabled, and then you can choose the algorithm there as well. You also have the context name and the context engine ID that you can specify in here. That's SNMP v3 related. So only that is popping up when you go for the SNMP v3. Okay, let's maybe, before we go to the next tab page, let's maybe already take a look at that in our UI. So we added the destination there with a specific name. So the IP address is going to be the one that I specify here. And I'm going to go for, without bothering too much about SNMP v3 security, I'm just going to go for an old-fashioned, you could say, SNMP v2, and you can go for trap or inform messages. Depending on what I choose here, I will have some other options on the resend, so I will go back and forward between the resend and this first page to change it. Otherwise, I'm not going to change anything, so I'm just happy with SNMP v2 traps from any DataMiner agent default port. That's fine. So I can go to next at the bottom. I can click on next, or I can just myself click on the next page there. So that next page is about how does the notification look like. The first option I have is whether my system supports Unicode characters. So if you have special characters with all kinds of accents or special things, letters that are being used, it is recommended to make sure that this is activated. Otherwise, certain characters might not get through, like element names, for instance, could contain international characters. Unicode characters, as they say it. The next thing is the notification or trap or inform OID. So OID is the object identifier, so it has like a unique ID. So you can choose between the default one specified here using a device-specific OID, which is basically going to make sure that it's unique for the protocol of the element, so that all my Cisco switches and all my Microsoft servers have their specific OID. So that could be used, for instance, for filtering purposes on the other side. Or you can also go for a custom binding with the object identifier you specify here. It is all within the 8813, that's the Skyline object identifier, so it's always within that one. Below that, that's interesting, you do have the custom bindings. Basically, you could see this as the columns in your alarm console. So in your alarm console, you have the element name, you have the parameter, you have the value, you have the severity, you have the date time. And remember that you can add a whole bunch of additional columns as well. So that's exactly the same thing here. So we do have a default set of columns, bindings. They are basically bindings attached to your trap that you're sending to the other third-party system there. And you can add new items or new bindings in that list. For instance, if you want to add additional properties like gold, silver, bronze, you want to add in there, or maybe certain other fields that are not in there by default are of interest for you, like for instance, the polling IP or whatever of the device. Let's take a look at that. By default, Unicode, that's perfectly fine. Device-specific OID, I'm happy with that. And you can see the list of the bindings that are in there by default. So that's like the name of the element, system name it's called, the name of the element, the parameter name, the value, the severity, the timestamp, the alarm severity, status type, etc. So a little bit like your columns in your alarm console, the same thing you could see as you have here in your alarm console. If you want to change this, you need to go for the custom, and then you can also add any of the additional columns that we have in there. So also the properties that we can add, the additional custom properties, my element BERT class that I added before, you can still see it here in my surveyor, the silver and bronze elements that I have. You can attach that as an additional binding to your traps as well. Okay, and things like, for instance, if you would like to add the root time or things like that, columns that are not in there by default, you can easily add them. You can also generate a MIB file, the MIB file. If you would change and add some columns, you can generate a MIB file so that you can easily import it on the other side. I'll just leave it on the default. I won't customize this. I'm happy with the default columns that contains the necessary information that I need. Okay, the recent tab page is something that basically tries to handle a little bit with the unreliability of that UDP layer that we are using there. So we've added some possibilities there. And if you're going for SNMP traps or inform messages, you will have for traps only one option. Inform messages has two options. So with traps, as I said, we just send them. We don't know if they arrive, and UDP doesn't guarantee the delivery. So what we can do is a little bit brute force, but we could say like, okay, let's resend all the active alarms every minute or every 30 seconds or every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You can define this. It's a little bit brute force, but it makes sure if some alarms are not getting through or you have some network interruption, that a little bit later on the resend will make sure that the other side is up to date again. So every 30 seconds, it takes all the active alarms of your system and it throws it again to the other side, hoping that they will arrive eventually. A little bit brute force, but it works. There is also a custom OID you can use during the resend, and there is also a ping that you can have for the start of the resend and the end of the resend. So you can activate here that you basically notify the other system like, oh, I'm starting a resend, doing the resend, and then again notifying that you're ending the resend. So you can activate the start and the end ping here and define some custom OIDs on there. Now, this is for trap and also for the inform messages, you can activate this. So the inform messages, that's the bottom one here. The resend is here as well. But the inform messages have, as I mentioned before, an acknowledgement that needs to be sent. So whenever we send an alarm to the other system needs to send back an acknowledgement. If we are not receiving the acknowledgement within a certain time span, we are going to send a resend of that same alarm. You can say here that we need to retry after 20 seconds. If it doesn't arrive, we do a resend every 20 seconds. We retry again and again and again for a maximum number of times. So here you can specify basically the timeout or when you do the resend. So you send something, you wait for 10-20 seconds. If we don't get the reply back or the acknowledgement back, we are doing a resend for 10 seconds. If you activate this send in a chronological order, be aware that DataMiner is going to wait. If we send the first alarm, we are going to wait until we get an acknowledgement back before we send the second alarm. This could slow down the possibility to transfer a large amount of alarms, but it makes sure that on the other side, the alarm and clearing and are basically sent in the correct order. Because otherwise, if we just send them and very short alarms could actually arrive in a different order because UDP also doesn't guarantee the order. So if you want to make sure that this is in a chronological order, you need to activate this option, although it slows down a little bit your throughput you have. Okay, so if we take a look at that, remember that in the general, I went for SNMP v2 traps, the default old-fashioned traps. So the resend only has the possibility to say like, okay, resend the alarms every 30 seconds or every minute. You can change that, of course, with the advanced to do some more configuration on that. If we although go back to the general page and we go for the inform message, then we will see that on the resend page, we now have the retries. We can say like, okay, every 20 seconds, I need to do with a maximum of 10 retries. I need to try to make sure that my inform message arrives on the other side. So that's the difference we have between the trap and the inform message there. So the trap is the more less guaranteed version, you could say. Okay, very important, of course, is the filter, because typically you're not going to send every alarm of your DataMiner system to the other third-party system there, but typically you're more going to be interested in, for instance, critical only alarms. So only the critical impacting alarms I'm going to send to the other system. If it's just a warning, that doesn't need to be forwarded. As you can see, maybe you recognize this. This is the same alarm filter configuration that we basically have on various places in the UI, and we already saw it in the alarm console. When we added an additional tab page in the alarm console with filtering, we had this filter available here as well. So we can say if the severity is equal to critical, then basically send the alarms. This is using, you can use your same filters that you already created in the alarm console. So if in the alarm console you already configured some alarm filters there, you can easily just say like, okay, I'm going to use a saved filter that I previously created and choose one of the available saved filters. Just be aware, when we are adding or creating a new saved filter, we had that possibility there to choose between a private filter, a public, or a protected. A private filter is only available for my user, and therefore we cannot use it in here, because otherwise if another administrator would log into the system, he wouldn't see the filter because it would be a private filter. So you're only allowed here to use filters that are either public or protected, and that's what we call the so-called shared filters. A shared filter is shared amongst all the users. Either if it's public, they can also edit it. If it's protected, they cannot edit the filter. Only the author can create or edit the filter. So we can also, of course, create a new filter from here. So we do have that familiar interface. Is severity equal to critical, for instance, we can use in here. Okay, let's take a look at that in our UI. So let's go to the next page, the filter page. And we can, if we don't specify a filter, it's going to send everything. So be aware of that. So we can add a saved filter. And my filter is not in here because previously during the alarm console, I created a filter, but I did not create a public or protected one. So it was a private one. So maybe I just need to create a new filter. So let me remove that and go for a new filter. And for instance, say critical only, just to get the hang of it. Now you only have two options. Private is not possible in this environment. So I'm going to make it protected. They don't need to change it. It's just a very simple one that I'm going to create. Nobody needs to mess around with this one. So is severity equal to critical, close, and okay that. and I basically created a new filter, the critical only there. If you want to change it and further fine-tune it, you can click on the edit and you immediately see the details of your filter that you created. Severity equal to critical. I can add more things to it, for instance, also limited to a certain site in my system. So now only critical alarms will be forwarded to that destination that I defined. And last one in that series of tab pages for the configuration of my destination is the alarm storm possibility, or alarm storm prevention, I should say. The alarm storm prevention is something where you can say like, okay, if DataMiner is suddenly generating way too many alarms, please don't send all of them to that destination there. So you can enable the alarm storm prevention, and optionally you can also group here. I'll come back to that. If you enable the alarm storm prevention, you have 3 things you need to specify here. You need to say like, if 10 alarms are happening within 10 seconds, then the alarm storm kicks in. And if the alarm storm stops, if it's again for 10 seconds without any alarm. So it's indicated here on the timeline. So the timeline, we are moving forward in time. An alarm happens and an alarm clears. So the critical alarm has been forwarded here. Again, an alarm happens, and again and again, and basically a whole series of alarms is suddenly happening within a short period of time, maybe like 100 alarms in 10 seconds. Then it will kick in and it will send a special alarm storm started trap to the destination, and it won't do any forwarding anymore. So it says like, oh, too many alarms, 100 alarms happened in 10 seconds, I stop with it. And only if it's again for 10 seconds, like without any new alarms, the alarm storm is over, then it clears again, and it will also notify the other site to with an alarm storm stopped. That is indicated here. The alarm storm stopped notification will be sent, and the other system knows that it will again be updated on new alarms. So I said there is a second option here. So by default, if you enable this alarm storm prevention, it will just detect any alarms. If you say group alarms with the same parameter name, it will only look if there are 100 alarms within 10 seconds within one element, one parameter. So if one parameter of an element is suddenly generating a massive amount of alarms, then it will go into alarm storm. So it allows 100 alarms within 10 seconds if it's all on different parameters and different elements. So that's the grouping of the alarms that is optionally also possible to enable. And finally, or maybe I should first take a look also in my UI, the alarm storm. So in here, let me close my surveyor. So you can enable the alarm storm, and you can say like, if there are 5 alarms or maybe 10 alarms in, let's say 10 seconds, then I want to go into alarm storm mode. And if it's again calm for 5 seconds, for instance, without any alarms, I go out of the alarm storm prevention again. Maybe the grouping, I don't want to activate that, so you can disable that. That's it. I can save that, and I added my third-party system here, and it's going to basically forward all the critical alarms that I specified, the critical alarms, with the default bindings, the default columns, no resend, no alarm store, no alarm store, to this IP address. SNMP v2 traps will be sent there. Let me save without the alarm store there. So that's basically what it is. And here you can see the result on our last slide here. It's just captured in some kind of software that is able to capture the SNMP traps. It has some default stuff, an SNMP trap. Don't really worry too much about that. The most interesting things are all the bindings. basically all the columns as I specified before. You can choose which bindings that are added to it. That's the default here. So you can see the name of the device, the parameter, the value, it's a critical high, it's a new alarm, there's the time, all these kind of things are just added to the different columns, and the third-party system can use that and basically parse that information very easily. So that's basically what it looks like. I hope this was of interest and you now know how you can notify a third-party system through the northbound interface, more specifically the SNMP trap forwarding or SNMP inform messages that you can send out. See you in the next one.